About getting started.
Sure.
Um, uh, so, hello, everybody. Welcome to the Polish American Historical Association's latest webinar. This is a continuing series, and Anya might say a few words later about the webinars that are coming up. But the title today is Who I Am, Who We Are, with poet John Guzłowski and literature specialist Izabella Kimak. That slippery question of identity continues to be potent for Poles and the Polish people in the diaspora. It spans generations, historical epochs, immigrant cohorts, geographic boundaries, racial and gender constructs, economic, social conditions, and of course, individual human experience. So don't worry, John and Isa. I don't expect you to sort out all those strands for us today. But I do look forward to this chance to think about being Polish and Polish American as distilled through that lens of poetry and literature. So thank you to my colleagues at the Polish American Historical Association for organizing all these opportunities for all of us to come together from the far corners of the world and from the various uh, weather patterns of the world we're hearing about today. Next January, we'll have a chance to actually meet in person at our annual conference in Chicago. January in Chicago, I know you're all looking forward to that. Um, so, but seriously, it really should be an awesome conference in the historical heart of Polonia. So now I'm going to turn things over to Ivona Flis, and she'll be introducing our speakers. Ivona?
Thank you. It is a great pleasure and a real privilege to have with us today our distinguished, award-winning, and beloved writer and poet, John Guzłowski, and a brilliant literary scholar, Iza Kimak. John Guzłowski's poems about his Polish parents' experiences as slaves in Nazi Germany appear in his award-winning Echoes of Tattered Tongues. His most recent books of poems are Mad Monk EQ, True Confessions, and Small Talk, Writing About God and Writing About Me. His novels include Retreat, A Love Story, and The Hang and Marvin Mysteries, Suitcase Charlie, Little Altar Boy, and Murder Town, all published by Kaswa Press. He's also a columnist for the Dziennik Związkowy, the oldest Polish newspaper in America. In reviewing the Polish edition of Guzłowski's book Language of Mules, Nobel laureate Czesław Miłosz wrote, "Exceptional, even astonished me, reveals an enormous ability for grasping reality." Guzłowski received his BA in English Literature from the University of Illinois, Chicago, and his MA and PhD in English from Purdue University. He's a professor emeritus of English Literature at Eastern Illinois University and currently lives in Lynchburg, Virginia. He's also the winner of the Illinois Arts Council Award for Poetry, has also been shortlisted for the Bakeless Award and nominated for the Pulitzer Prize twice and the Pushcart Prizes 5 times. He has been honored by the Georgia State Commission on the Holocaust and the Central Virginia Holocaust Educators for his work on telling the story of slave laborers in Nazi Germany. And now Dr. Izabella Kimak. Izabella Kimak is an assistant professor at the Department of British and American Studies at Maria's Curie-Sklodowska University in Lublin, Poland. Her research interests encompass contemporary US American literature with particular emphasis on race, ethnicity, gender, and sexuality. She's the Secretary General of the European Association for American Studies, as well as elected representative of the Polish Association for American Studies to the EEAS. Kościuszko Foundation Fellow and a recipient of the Polish National Science Center Research Grant for the project Sweet Home Chicago, the Windy City and American Writers of Polish Descent. Last but not least, she's our member. So, Isa, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Ivona, for this kind introduction. And thank you, everyone, for joining me and John today, this evening, I was about to say, because it's getting late in Poland. or this afternoon for you in the States. Now, when we were talking with John about the idea for this meeting, we thought that we would start with John reading some selected excerpts of this book, which is the reason why we are here. So his most recent publication, Who I Am, Lives Told in Kitchen Polish. And afterwards, we will start talking about the book, but also about John's larger literary project. And we really hope that many of you will be willing to participate in this discussion. So I hope my role will be primarily that of the moderator. And we also agreed with Anya Miller and with Karen and Ivana that you may either write your questions in the chat whenever you're ready, or feel free just to raise your hand and unmute yourselves and ask your questions directly. So whatever works better for you. John, can we start with hearing some of your work?
Sure, thank you. I'd like to, the topic is who I am, who we are. And I'd like to start with the first of the columns that's in the book. And the first one is called, What Does It Mean to Be Polish? I'd like to read that. My dad knew. He was born in a small village north of Poznań in 1920. And he lived there on his uncle's farm until he was captured by the Germans in 1940 and sent to the slave labor camps in Germany. My dad's memories bound him to Poland as sure as the turning of the earth. For my dad, Poland was a country rich with faith in God and faith in the strength of Polish honor. When my dad talked about Poland, it was like his voice became a holy whisper. He would tell me about the beauty of Sundays and holy days. He would tell me that he thought as a boy that he would always live according to the religious seasons and the holy days that came regularly, like the ringing of the bells in the church steeple in his village. As a child, he loved going early to church, especially on Easter Sunday, leaving the farm with his aunt and uncle before the sun was a pink silence over the east, and coming to the church where little girls and boys in their best clothes still stood holding lilies. And the beauty of this faith was somehow mixed with his faith in Polish honor. He believed that he had an obligation as a Pole to be a good person, a kind, helpful, and courageous person, dedicated to keeping Poland safe and whole. Sometimes when my dad was talking about Poland and his love for it, my mom would joke and say that it was like my dad and Poland shared a single soul. Listening to him, I sometimes thought she was right. I'd see this especially on May 3rd, Polish Constitution Day. He had gathered with the other Poles in the neighborhood to pray for Poland and its flag. There was never a question what the colors of the flag stood for back then. Red for all the sorrows these old Poles felt in America, separated from the mother country they loved, and white for hope and innocence. And they always sang the old Polish songs that told the world Poland would never fall, so long as poppies flowered red and flesh could conquer rock and steel. Did I see Poland this way? No, I didn't. I loved to listen to him talk about Poland and his Polish faith and his love of Polish honor when I was a boy, but I couldn't share his love. Although I was born in a DP camp in Germany, I was brought up here in America. And when I was a child, all I wanted to do was be an American kid. I wanted to be like everybody else. I wanted to go to ball games and movies. I wanted to sing like Elvis Presley. I wanted to live a life like the lives I saw on TV. Growing up, I saw my dad's Poland as nothing more than the past, a rich memory, but one that I could never, ever share. And then all of that changed when I was in my 30s. I don't know how it happened, but I became hungry for Poland, for the Poland that my father remembered and loved. Okay.
Thank you so much. So that's the first column that is included in Who I Am: Lives Told in Kitchen Polish, and I guess it's a perfect start for our discussion on Polish identity in the United States, but also about how Polishness is configured differently by depending on the generation that one is a member of. But really, one of the first questions that I would like us to consider is how you came up with the idea for this book. If there are people here with us today who are not familiar with this book, Who I Am: Lives Told in Kitchen Polish, which, by the way, is the book to inaugurate the PAHA book series. Congratulations to PAHA for thinking about this idea. So the book is essentially a collection of the columns that you wrote over years for the Dziennik Związkowy. So how did you come up with this idea of publishing these columns in a book form, and what we as readers get because of this choice?
Well, I never ever set out to write columns. I started writing poems and sending poems out, and then I started writing fiction after I retired from teaching. And all of the writing I did was either poems or fiction novels. I started writing the columns because someone asked me to write columns. Daniel Pogorzelski mentioned my name to the editor of the newspaper, and they got in contact with me and asked me to write columns. I had never written a column in my entire life. The only thing I wrote that was close to a column, I wrote movie reviews for a small town in Indiana when I was going to graduate school. But that was the only thing I ever written for a newspaper. But so I thought, well, let me try this. I'm always interested in different kinds of writing. And so I said I would try it, and I wrote my first column, and it was a column about the pathways to citizenship in the United States and how they were changing. And I wrote that one column, and I never thought I could write another column, and but I did, and it blew me away when I sat down to consider doing a collection of these poems, of these columns rather. I was surprised that there were more than 250 columns I had written at that point. And at this point, in 2025, I don't know how many columns there are altogether. I haven't counted them, but I think it's probably at least 300 and something columns, which, blows my mind to think of all of those columns.
So how did you decide which to include in this collection?
It was an interesting process, because when I first sat down to do a book, I just thought, well, I'll just publish all of the columns that I have. And like I said, it was about 250 columns. I started writing the columns in 2018, and I started working on the book in 2023. And there were 250 columns, and I just thought, well, I'll put them all in, and I'll see if I can find somebody who would be interested in publishing it. And after doing that, after getting all of these columns together, I saw that PAHA was going to start publishing books, and that they were interested in submissions. And so I sent them a letter telling them about my columns, and they got in touch with me, and they were interested in the columns, and I was interested in them. What was interesting, though, was that the columns themselves, I mean, I write about my parents, I write about my Polishness, but I also write about things like, I wrote about the pandemic. I wrote a lot of columns about the pandemic. I write a lot of columns about the political situation in America. I write about I write about writers who I like, Polish writers and Polish American writers who I write. I write about a variety of topics, and PAHA was primarily interested in the columns about my parents and my Polishness, and I think that's about. Let me see. Let me check the book. I think that's about
86. I just checked.
Yeah. It's 86 columns, and
Yeah.
so that this is about a third of the columns I had at the time, and I thought it was a good way to approach that. I thought that since PAHA was considering publishing it, that doing the columns that focused on my parents and their Polishness and what it was like being in America, that all of that made sense.
Mm-hmm. I was also wondering when I first saw your book and I started reading it, what was the logic behind the structure? So
Oh,
the columns are numbered from 1 to 86, and for the most part, I had this feeling that okay, they have been selected chronologically. The earliest comes from 2018,
yeah.
and then the columns go on to 2023. But then towards the end of the book, this chronology is broken. And any reasons for this?
That's my fault. Uh, uh, the the chronological ones were the ones that focused primarily on my parents and their story. But then what happened was I also wanted to include some that I thought were important to me, and that ones that this didn't necessarily adhere to the chronology of the columns. And so that's what, and I was very happy that Neil Peace and James Pula were willing to let me do that, and that's so I broke the chronology.
No, but actually the thought that I had, yeah, go ahead, sorry.
No, I'll just say it's totally my fault.
No, I didn't even perceive it in a way of, like some kind of mistake or fault. But the impression that I had just as a regular reader was that those columns that are situated at the very end, they very often, at least to me, they seem to concentrate on particular holidays or celebrations or
Yeah,
important
yeah,
days,
yeah,
like historical
yeah.
events, commemorations of historical events. So it made perfect sense, but I was just curious
Yeah.
how the process went of, arriving at this particular structure.
Yeah, those holidays were important to me because it was interesting because my parents, I think about my life in America and my life in America. There, we celebrate birthdays here. Yesterday was the 50th anniversary of my wife and the two of us being married.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you. We celebrate that, and we celebrate so many different days here. And my parents celebrated so little. May 3rd, Constitution Day, Easter, Lent. They did things during Lent, Christmas, and so I wanted to include those sorts of holidays and those sorts of holidays because they were important to my parents. Yeah.
Yeah. So, as you've said, a lot of those columns that are included in the book reflect on what it means to be Polish in America, and
Yeah.
they also render the experiences of your parents. And actually, this is a motif that I see in a lot of your writing, in your poetry in particular, in Echoes of Tattered Tongue that Ivana mentioned in her introduction. And also reading those columns, actually, as a reader, I have to tell you that it was an amazing experience reading those columns together because prior to the publication of this book, I was reading your scattered columns, but never, as in this one process or at one sitting, one in the context of other columns. And it is so clear to me that there are some motifs that recur over and over in your writing. And this is what I would like you to reflect on, if you don't mind, on this a lot of your work is deeply steeped in memory, in the memory of your parents' experiences during the war, but also in your own memories of growing up as a Pole in Chicago. Yeah. So, can you tell us a little bit about how you see the significance, or what is the significance of those literary acts of remembering?
Boy, I I find that remembering is really necessary for me, and I've when I taught creative writing for decades. I taught creative writing, and the first thing I would tell my students in a creative writing class was the first assignment I gave my students in creative writing was I told them to make a list of the 10 happiest memories they had and the 10 worst memories they had. And I then told them that everything that they had to write for the class was going to have to be either about the best things that have happened to them or the worst things that have happened to them. After I retired from teaching, I still occasionally taught some memoir writing classes, and I felt it was really important to teach those classes in memoir writing because to me, remembering the past is very important, and I think I get that from my father. My father could not stop talking about the past, and his past was terrible. Both of his parents died of tuberculosis when he was 5 years old. He lived with his uncle and his aunt on a small farm. The Germans came in 1939 to his farm, and soon after that he was taken to Germany. I mean, he spent 5 years in Buchenwald concentration camp and in the slave labor camps. Spent 6 more years after that as a DP, a refugee in a DP camp in Germany. I mean, his memories were terrible. His memories were just terrible. But he couldn't stop himself from sharing those memories. And when I was a kid, 5, 6, 7 years old, my father would tell me these stories about the things that had happened to him. And when I think back on it now, I think, he shouldn't have told me those stories. But then I also feel I'm glad that he told me those stories because it connected the two of us, and not only connected the two of us, but connected me to his story and the things that had happened to him and the history that he had lived through. So I had a sense of all of that I had a sense that was of all of that it was important to him, and it was also important to me, and also connected us. Those memories really, his sharing those memories really connected the two of us. I sometimes think that as a writer, what I'm doing now is I'm telling the stories my father wanted me to tell. I'm sharing those same stories. I'm keeping him alive. I'm keeping his memory alive. And when I keep these memories alive, I feel that I'm with my father. That my father is finally, he's never died. He's always with me in these shared stories that I have. Same thing with my mother. I felt when my mother wouldn't tell me anything about what had happened to her for a long, long time. And I would ask her to tell me. My father would tell me a story, and I would ask my mother to give me her side of the story, or to tell me something about the story. And all she would say is about the camps. All she would say is, if they beat you, run away. If they give you bread, eat it. And then she would say, that's all I'm going to say. And so I really wasn't connecting to her, not until she was much, much older. in her late 50s, early 60s, she started sharing the stories. I think it was when, after my father died, she started sharing the stories. It was like she expected my father to be the storyteller for the family. And then when he passed away, she felt that she needed to tell those stories also. I think I lost track of the question.
No, but that's beautifully put. What you said about memory as a way to connect, and
Oh
for
yeah,
you, it is a way of, connecting with your
yeah,
parents, but in a way, you are also forging connection with your readers, and it's kind of making them remember
oh yeah.
together with you.
I spend too much time on Facebook, and one of the things that happens on Facebook is I'll I'll mention a memory. I'll share a memory, and what will happen is one of my Facebook friends will say, I have a similar memory, or I remember something my mother or my father said that is similar to this. And they start telling me these stories. And I'm thinking, this is wonderful. This is exactly what I want them to do. I want them to do even more. I want them to tell longer stories and to just, fill in so much information about what their parents said. And one of my friends today, one of my Facebook friends today, told me that her mother was in the Polish American woman, and her mother was in the French Resistance. And I thought, holy smokes,
Wow.
that's a great story. I want to know more about that.
Yeah. Can I go back for a moment to this story that you shared about your mother starting to relate what happened to her wartime experiences? Because I remember that in the epilogue to Echoes of Tattered Tongues, you write how for your mother what mattered and also what kind of sparked her willingness to share those stories with you was her reading of your poems in Polish.
Yeah.
And I think I would really like us to reflect on this a little, if possible. So what you write about in this piece, let me just check. The story behind the poems is the title of this prose piece, right? That you included as epilogue to Echoes of Tattered Tongues.
Yeah.
And you were saying that it was only after your mother had the chance to read your poetry
Yeah.
in Polish, in Bogdan Zadura's translation, that she was able to kind of react to it. And then in this new book, I really love the subtitle. So, Who I Am, Lives Told in Kitchen Polish. So, in both of these, both in the title and in the story of your mother's reading your poetry in translation, the question of language comes to the fore.
Yeah.
And so, how do you think language matters for one's sense of identity as a Polish American specifically?
Well, to my Polish. I always thought my Polish was very good until two things happened. Because I spoke nothing but Polish until I was. We came to America when I was 3 years old, and before that, there was only Polish. And then, it wasn't until I went to kindergarten at St. Hedwig's in Chicago that and the classes there were bilingual classes in Polish and in English because there were so many Polish kids in the class. And when I spoke to my mother, I would pretty much always speak in English. My mother had a gift for language. My father had no gift for language. And when he and I spoke, we would speak in Polish. And when my father died in 1997, that's basically when I stopped speaking Polish. I mean, before that, I was speaking Polish to him on the phone. He lived in Arizona. I lived in Illinois. But I would call him up every day and we'd speak Polish. And then I wasn't speaking Polish. When my book came out in Poland, the Language of Mule books, Język Mułów, yeah. When that came out in Poland, I did a book tour in Poland, and they asked me if I felt I needed a translator. This was in 2002, and I said, no, I don't need a translator. My Polish is perfect. And they thought that was pretty funny. They said, you need a translator. And they got me one, and they were right. The other thing, the other interesting thing about language is my mother didn't want to speak Polish to me. After my father died, she lived alone in Arizona, in Sun City, Arizona. There was almost no Polish people there, and I offered to speak Polish. I said, "Mom, let's talk Polish, because you'll feel great speaking Polish, and you probably miss speaking Polish." And she said, "Johnny, your Polish hurts my ears. I don't want to hear it. Let's just talk English."
Hence kitchen Polish, I understand.
Oh.
And the epigraph to Who I Am is a poem that is included in your earlier collection, right? In Echoes of Tattered Tongue, as part of the sequence of 4 poems on language specifically, 2 words of language. So would you mind reading this poem?
Sure. Read the kitchen Polish.
Kitchen Polish, yeah.
Okay, yeah. I got it right here.
Thank you.
Kitchen Polish. I can't tell you about Kant in Polish, or the Reformation or deconstruction, or why the Nazis moved east before moving west, or where I came from. But I can count to 10, say hello and goodbye, ask for coffee, bread, or soup. I can tell you people die. It's a fact of life, and there's nothing you or I can do about it. I can say, please, God, and don't be afraid. If I look out at the rain, I can tell you it's falling. If there's snow, I can say, it's cold outside today. It most likely be cold tomorrow.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, that's my Polish, I wrote that poem I don't know, maybe 20 years ago. My Polish is now probably not even kitchen Polish anymore. It's I was going to say it's bathroom Polish, but I'm not going to say that. But it's my Polish is just my mother died in 2006. My mother died in 2006, and I haven't lived any place where there are people who want to speak Polish to me. I live in Lynchburg, Virginia now, and when we first moved to Lynchburg 10 years ago, I gave a poetry reading about my parents at the University of Lynchburg, and a professor came up to me, and he introduced himself and said he was Polish. And I said, that's great. You and I should get together once a week and have coffee, and I can speak to you in Polish, and I could practice my Polish with you. And he said he would rather not. And I think he must have sensed how bad my Polish was. So.
The poem Kitchen Polish in Echoes of Tattered Tongue, like I said, it forms part of this sequence of 4 poems that all deal with language. And these are such powerful poems in my view, because in one of these you recount an experience of being bullied in the street and calling for your mom's help in English, and if I may quote, we called to our mother softly, you write, in the English we didn't know and had only practiced in whispers. And your mom had no English at all, right? And didn't come to your rescue.
Yeah,
but then again, the last poem in this sequence is on your grandparents. And you evoke here an image of the grandparents in the, you know, like Eastern European attire, sitting sitting in the kitchen and just nodding. So the communication with the grandparent generation would have to take place, you know, despite language or in
Yeah.
other means than language.
Yeah.
So if not language, then yeah, if you cannot communicate with the parents or the grandparents generation in Polish, so can you think of any other aspects in which Polish ethnicity kind of survives, even when language is lost?
Oh, I think that what we do is, you know, I don't know if this is true, you know, of everybody, but I think that what happens is that even when the language is lost, there's something in us that feels a connection with where we came from, where our parents, where our grandparents came from. I have a friend. Let me see if he's one of the participants. No, his name is Andrew Clinic. He lives in Australia. He's a novelist, and his grandmother was in the slave camps in Germany. She's Polish. She was Polish. And she was in the slave camps. She was in the DP camps, and the memory of this, and the memory of this is so important to him that he went back. He found out as much as he could about her. He visited the sites in Poland where she lived, the places in Poland that she lived, and he wrote a novel about his experience, novel about her experiences, because it was all of that stuff was so important to him, that memory. And I get, you know, I'm just thinking that's, if we're lucky, the past has some kind of hold on us, and it connects us to a story that's important to us, that we never want to let go of. Yeah.
Thank you. Now, would any of the participants in the webinar like to ask John some questions? My list is not finished, and I could go on, but it would be wonderful, I think, if right now we gave the chance to other people to ask questions and participate. And you can do it either by writing your question in the chat box or just, you know, unmuting yourself. Paweł, please.
Yes, to Professor Guzłowski. My question is, in the pre-war Poland, there were two visions, two viewpoints on Polish patriotism, the Dmowski and Piłsudski, right? They had two different visions of Polish patriotism. Which one was the right one, according to you, or maybe to your father? Maybe your father mentioned something about it.
You know, I don't remember. What are the two different? Tell me what the two different ones.
Well, the Dmowski represented the nationalistic point of view. Piłsudski represented the federalist point of view. They had two different visions of Poland. According to Dmowski, Poland should be only for generally Polish people. According to Piłsudski, he represented a different vision of Poland with a more multi-ethnic element. Also, they had different vision on economic development of Poland. You know, it's a very long topic, you know, to present. So, and also, it's very important, you know, the Dmowski concentrated more on economic elements. Piłsudski concentrated more on traditional, noble Polish tradition, right?
Let me tell you, my father had a photograph that he brought with him from the refugee camps in Germany, and it was a photograph that he brought to America. And every house that he moved into, he kept this photograph with him. It's a photograph of Piłsudski and his daughter.
Okay.
Yeah, and this was something that was very, very important to my father. So all I can say is that probably my father would feel that if my father was going to go to war, he would go to war with Pilsudski.
Okay. Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions at this point? Professor Kirschman, please.
Hi, everybody. John, as you know, I am a fan of your writing, both poetry and everything else, for a long, long time. What is striking about your poems compared to your essays, to me, is the poetic language that appears in both forms. So the poems are pure poetry, but the essays are so close to poetry.
Yeah.
In
Yeah.
some ways, some of them can be read as poetry,
Yeah.
even though the purpose was different. These
Yeah.
were columns and so on. Have you ever experienced while writing your essays that you all of a sudden kind of cross into poetry?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I write. I write the columns, but I also write. I've written the novels and written short stories, and a lot of the writing. When I'm writing prose, I will sometimes feel as if I'm writing poetry. I'll be writing a sentence, and something will happen in the sentence, and I'll have the same feeling toward that sentence as I would if the sentence were in a poem. I wrote a series of short stories, science fiction short stories, a couple of years, well, too long ago. But the stories consisted of short chapters that were about this long. They were the length of poems, and each chapter was like a poem. It didn't look like a poem, but it was like a poem, and that's the way I thought about it as I was writing it. And I get that feeling also when I'm writing the columns sometimes, when I really feel that I'm saying things I want to be saying in a way I want them to be said. I feel that it's like poetry. When I read through some of the columns, like I was reading through some of the columns this morning, I was seeing language that was similar to the language of the poems I do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thank you.
If I may make another little comment, Isa asked what it is other than language that can bring that feeling of closeness to ancestors, to family members that might be distant geographically or through time. In several of your columns and also in many of your poems, you write about food as that moment of both making it and sharing it and eating it.
Yeah.
When kind of our, as you said about your father, that the souls connect. Can you comment on that a little?
Food. Yeah. I guess, I'm thinking about the last poem in the Echoes of Tattered Tongues. And the last poem is there in the book is about how I finally get back in touch with my parents, and we're in heaven. I mean, literally, we're in heaven, and we're sitting down at a table in heaven, and I think we're having coffee or something like that. But we're sharing the table in heaven, and we're also sharing the memories, and we're coming back together. And my parents are saying, "What took you so long to get here?" And so I think it's the sense of food, but then also food was just so important to my parents. My father couldn't stop talking about how difficult it was in the labor camps to get food. When my dad was liberated, he weighed 70 pounds. And I've given many lectures, readings, these poetry readings about my parents. And one of the questions I always ask in schools when I do this is I ask is, does anybody here weigh 70 pounds? And there's no one in the one time I had a student who weighed 70 pounds. And she was somebody who was like triple promoted from 5th grade to 8th grade. And that's why she weighed more than 70 pounds. She weighed 70 pounds. But, my father there was no food. The same thing with my mother. She talks about digging beets up and on the labor when she was in a slave labor camp and going into a field and digging beets up that the Germans wanted her to gather out of the earth. And she's starving and she eats a beet and she's afraid they're going to kill her for eating this beet. So their food was very, very important.
Thank you.
Yeah.
To kind of continue this aspect of food, I remembered this poem, Fussy Eaters, that you include, John, in Echoes of Tattered Tongues as well. And the poem essentially is about some kind of resistance to Polish cuisine on the part of your sister and you, unwilling to eat the good Polish sausage.
Oh, yeah,
right?
Yeah.
So would you say that this kind of resistance is kind of part and parcel of growing up or being a teen in an ethnic home?
Yeah. Well, let me say that I'm a vegetarian now, and probably what caused it was eating the bizarre meat that I ate as a boy. Please ask the question again.
No, I was asking if because in this poem there is this clear conflict over food.
Yeah.
That is related, right? The mother being so upset about the children not being willing to eat, and then there is this fragment about your sister Danusha saying, "I can't eat this Polak food. It's gray, tough, and laced with veins that steal my breath away so much I feel like choking." So I was wondering whether this conflict over food and over cuisine is just, would that be a typical thing for teenagers growing up in ethnic households as a sign of their desire for, just being Americans?
I think so. I grew up in a neighborhood that was predominantly Polish American in Chicago. And on my block, there were about 20 kids who lived on my block. And there was, let me see if he's in the guest list over here. There were only 1 or 2 kids of my friends who felt a real commitment to their Polish identity. And these were the kids who went to Saturday Polish school, who went to summer camps, Polish summer camps in Chicago, who loved Polish food. But all of the other Polish American kids I knew, all of them, wanted to be, like I said, we wanted to sing like Elvis Presley, and we wanted to dream like we were American kids. And for me, it wasn't until my 30s that I became interested in my Polishness again. But I don't know about the others. I think that might be unusual. I think about the Polish American friends I had as a kid, and how many of them decided to find out something about their Polishness. Very few of them tried to find out about that.
I would like to ask you later to tell us some more about this experience of growing up in
Sure.
this Polish American neighborhood of Chicago. But we have two questions, I believe.
Okay.
Ted was first, I think.
Hi, John, I remember the meal we had together in Lynchburg, and I was asked to pronounce a few Polish words to see if the other people at the table could recognize anything out of them. And you said you were Polish and you couldn't recognize anything either.
What were the words? I can't remember.
I don't remember now, but przyjaciele or stuff like that, and that was your comment. The pronunciation and was so different from what you were ready for.
Oh.
Yeah, I come from a very different generation. So my father, for example, grew up in the late 1800s when the Poland was still partitioned. And the struggles of that day were what he was remembering about and was impressed with. He never saw anything about World War II until he got to Poland in 1946 with some relief supplies, and he was shocked by what he saw. But we spoke Polish and English at home from, as far as I could remember. I was always bilingual. That's it. We could have a long conversation.
You remind me of something. My parents went back to Poland in 1988. They had my dad left Poland in 1940 to go to the camps. My mother left in 42. They came back in 1988, and what they were surprised by was the language of Poland. And my father spoke almost no English at all, but the language of Poland had changed so much in the years that they were gone that they didn't feel comfortable. There may have been other reasons also, but they didn't feel comfortable in Poland with the language. I would love to hear if somebody else has had a similar experience. I'd love to hear about that.
My father said it when he came into Poland in 1946 after being away since before World War I. There were so many words that he didn't know in Polish, new words, and how many English words he had Polonized in his own language. He thought he was speaking good Polish.
Yeah.
And he mixed in a lot of English words. So that happens over a period of time.
Well, all languages evolve and change, and if we're living in a culture, evolve and change across cultures, and
Thank you so much. We have a few more questions. So perhaps Paul?
Me? Oh, okay. Okay. I'm sorry. Paul
No, I meant Paul, but that's fine. Paweł, you may go ahead and then...
Okay, to Professor Guzłowski, one more question. How did your father define his Polishness? I'm asking because I'm 25% Silesian. Sometimes in the western region of Poland, our mixed families or their viewpoints on certain political or social issues were completely different.
I don't think it's a question I can answer. I've always, he always spoke of his Polishness and his commitment to Poland and to Polish honor. My mother became a naturalized citizen of the United States. My father refused. He had a green card, but he refused to become a citizen because he always said, when we tried to get him to become a citizen, he always said the same thing. He said, I was born in Poland. Everything about me is Polish. I'm not going to change that at all by becoming an American citizen. Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
That's so interesting. And you write about how your parents really came from two very different parts of Poland, right?
Oh, yeah.
Your father from Poznań, or around
north,
the area around
yeah,
Poznań, Wielkopolska, right? And
yeah,
your mother from what is now Ukraine.
yeah. And also, very, very different families. I mean, there were a lot of differences. My mother there were 8 children in my mother's family. Her father was a forest warden. My dad was just a farm boy. My mother had some education. My father had almost no education.
Okay, we have another question from Paul, and then I will read Karen's question that is in the chat. So, Paul, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you. You hear me all right? I've got this.
Yes,
Oh,
it's
good.
perfect.
Well, John, I'm really struck by some strong similarities that you and I share, but also some great differences. I was born in England rather than Germany because my father was in the Polish Resettlement Corps.
Uh-huh.
My father was orphaned at about the same age as your father. I grew up in Canada instead of the United States. But it was only years after my father died that I learned that he wasn't born in Poland. He was born in Siberia. And he grew up in Poland. But he had such terrible experiences in his early life and unlike your father, he never spoke about them. Well, he never mentioned the word Siberia. He's told me a little fragments about his growing up, and it's really in the last 20 years in doing research where I've discovered his origins through all sorts of archives, and so that I've developed any Polishness at all. And whatever, similar to you, I've written a book about it's a memoir of my father. I would have been interested to attend your creative writing classes. I didn't have any particular training, but my book is called Escape from Siberia, Escape from Memory. So it's a lot about memory and identity. So I would enjoy perhaps speaking with you more. I've sent you already, when you mentioned Facebook, a friend request, and maybe we could communicate further about similarities and differences.
I would very much like to talk about that. Yeah, friend of mine. Good Lord, I'm trying to remember her first name. Urbanski. She wrote a really great book about her family being in Siberia and coming to Chicago.
Oh,
but
really?
Anyway, yeah.
Oh, when was she in? I'm getting off on a tangent a bit here. My father was part of hundreds of Polish children who were rescued from Siberia with the help of the Japanese in 1920 and came to the United States for a year because of the Polish-Soviet War. So my father passed through Chicago and was in an orphanage in Milwaukee for a year and then went to Poland.
Amazing.
As then would have been about an 8-year-old.
Amazing. We'll have to talk about this.
Yeah,
it's great to see the PAHA webinars as such, such spaces for networking and forging connections. So it's wonderful to hear those parallels between your experiences. Now, some people are already saying goodbye and going off to protests. The webinar is scheduled for an hour and a half, so I hope that some of us still have some time to stay and continue the conversation. And we have some comments from Christina. Christina, go ahead.
Okay, can you hear me? This is the first time I'm zooming
Wonderful.
on my new iPad, which is way exciting for me. Cool. Really fortunate to be part of this webinar. John, it's nice to meet you. We are Facebook friends. I am the silver-haired rookie writer, which PAHA has embraced in a couple of conference presentations, which I'm very, very grateful for. I use family photos as prompts for short narratives. I just made these random notes based on things that you said, which I can relate to very much and appreciate, because one of the things that I felt when I was growing up in this to these Polish parents, a dad who was 50 when I was born, my mom was 42, and I just felt different. And in a rural area, which there was no Polish American neighbors, just a few extended family members throughout the community. There wasn't, that neighborhood. There wasn't the Polish Saturday school, etc. So I grew up with that lack, hearing about folks who grew up in Buffalo and had all of that stuff. But when you said your mother didn't speak until after your father died. My father didn't speak. My mother was the one that couldn't stop telling her story and told her story to people in a supermarket line. It was just, something that was important to her about her arranged marriage and how she landed in America and how I came to be. And I realized that I'm telling the stories my mother has inspired me to tell. And I do think your point about the past connecting us to stories that are important for each of us has our own unique story and a unique path that our ancestors have funneled us toward. And I think it's relevant and important that in whatever form feels right to us, that we convey them. So thank you for doing what you do. Especially as Polish Americans, I think it's important for us to communicate our diverse stories, because it's a challenging history. It's a very diverse history and a diverse population. And I'm doing a webinar at the end of the month. So, I hope you're free.
We'll be there.
I hope so too. Thank you.
Yeah. And also Pilsudski was on my father's wall. So to Pavel's point, not that I even understood, but, I've also been, reading this fabulous book as part of my research, and, it's contextualized a lot of stuff. So thanks all.
Let's talk about photographs then. Christina, as you said, your work is rooted in family pictures. We've heard, John, about Pilsudski's photograph that your father cherished so much. And as a matter of fact, you include a lot of, or some family photographs in your books as well. And I wanted to ask about this particular choice so what do photographs contribute to the narrative that we read?
What's interesting is that I had no intention of using photographs in the column book, although when the photographs appear when the columns appear in the newspaper, they're oftentimes accompanied by photo. They're always accompanied by photographs, and some of the photographs that they use in the newspaper are family photographs, my family's photographs. But I wasn't, I hadn't even been thinking about that, and it wasn't until Neil Peace suggested that I give him suggested we put some photographs in the book that I thought, well, that might be a good idea to put photographs in there. Photographs. The photographs are really important to it's such a strange story about the photographs. The photographs were very important to my parents. They brought photographs with them from the labor camp, not from the labor camp, from the refugee camps. They had photographs. There were people taking photographs in the refugee camp. They had photographs that they brought from the camp. they also had photographs that they had brought with them from Poland, and also photographs that after the war, my mother had a brother and a sister who survived the war, and they made copies of photographs and sent us photographs, sent my parents photographs. And the same thing, my father had a brother who was back in Poland, and he sent us photographs. So these photographs were really important. And then a terrible thing happened. We had all of these photographs, and toward the end of my mother's life, I was visiting her in Arizona, and I asked her, I wanted to take the photographs home with me, so that if she died, they wouldn't get lost over there. And so I asked her for these photographs, and she said she got rid of all of them.
Oh.
And I said, why? And she just shrugged. I don't know why she got rid of them. I mean, the photographs, I remember as a kid going through these photographs and, looking at the photograph. There was a photograph of my mother's mother sitting in a chair, and she was holding onto a bicycle. And it was a bicycle that was one of the kids in the family received as a birthday present. I mean, there were just all of these photographs, photographs of funerals, photographs of weddings, and all of these photographs, connected all of us together. And then my mother got rid of all these photographs, and I don't understand why.
So sorry to hear that.
Oh, me too.
But I also find it very interesting how you combine photography with your poetic and prose texts, making those books in a way a sort of a hybrid in terms of form.
Well, when I was interested in the question because my first dream as a writer was to write comic books. I wanted to write stories that had some kind of visual imagery connected to them. The first writing I did was like that, and I was always reading comic books when I was a kid and following the comic books and all of that stuff. All of that was very important to me, and in some ways it still is. You mentioned the photographs in the Who I Am book, and in my most recent book of poems, Small Talk, there are about 20 illustrations, 20 images that are done by this not British, he's a Minnesotan, he's a professor at the University of Minnesota in Duluth, who's an art teacher, and he and I have gotten together. We met somehow, and he loves to illustrate my poems, and so it's a book of illustrated poems, and those illustrations, it means a lot to me to be able to see that, and I think it also connects the words in the poems to other people, in ways that maybe the words themselves would not connect to them. Yeah.
Of course, absolutely.
Yeah.
And the same is true about your family photographs in your books. And I was thinking how, especially, I was really moved by the pictures included in Echoes of Tethered Tongues, because the book is essentially a narrative of trauma, right? Of the traumatic experiences of your parents. But then we see those pictures showing just life going on, right?
Oh, yeah.
And we see that we see joy, we see you smiling and just spending time together, which is also a wonderful kind of counterpoint to the text itself.
Yeah.
Now we also have a question in the chat from Karen. Karen, I'm so sorry to have kept you waiting so long. Let me go back to the question. The question is, there are other writers whose work engages the wartime experiences of their parents. Can you talk about your work in the context of that literary genre?
Well, yeah, my favorite prose writer is William Faulkner. And what William Faulkner does in all of his novels, he's writing about not in all of them, but in most of his 24, however many novels he wrote, he's writing about life in a county in Mississippi and the different families in that county, and he's writing about them across dozens and dozens of years of history. He's writing about these people, and he's fascinated by writing about families and family history, and I think I am too, in some way. That there's something in me that makes me interested in that kind of writing. I want to say something about my mystery novels.
Please do.
Yeah, I'm writing a series of mystery novels. Two detectives. One is a Polish Jewish guy, Marvin Bondarowicz, and the other one is an Irish American fellow, and they're two policemen. And the first book takes place in the 1950s. The second book takes place in the 60s. The third book takes place in the 70s. The fourth book, which isn't published yet, takes place in the 1940s, and it's an introduction to how these two guys get together. The book I'm writing right now is they're in their retirement, but the novels, these mystery novels, concentrate upon these two cops, Chicago cops, across how many years is that? From the 1940s to the 1990s, 50 years, across 50 years. Hank's family is in these novels. We see the families. We see his daughter growing older and older and becoming she starts out as a little kid in this little schoolboy novels, and she ends up a cop in the 1980s. And there's all of this focus on family and family across this stuff. And I think there's something, I'm not sure what it is, but there's something in me that draws me to narratives that have family in them. My wife loves to watch mystery novels, not mystery novels. My wife loves to watch mystery shows on TV. And my favorite mystery shows of the ones that she likes to watch are the ones where we get a sense of the families that these detectives have. And I guess it's somehow important to me. And maybe, come to think of it, maybe the reason why it's so important, these families are so important to me, is because when we came to America, it was just us. My mom, my dad, my sister Danusha, and me. There were just the four of us. We didn't have uncles. We didn't have grandparents. We didn't have aunts. Didn't have brothers. There was nobody here. And it was like that. It was like that for decades. There was no family except the family that had been left behind in Poland. And maybe my need for some kind of family comes from the fact that it was just the four of us. When we would have Thanksgiving dinner, it would just be the four of us sitting at a table. There wouldn't be a dozen people sitting around, a dozen uncles and aunts sitting around.
I'm certainly glad to hear, John, that Hank's daughter will be a cop, because at the very end of Murder Town, she comes back home and pregnant, if I recall.
Oh, yeah.
And then she kind of toys with the idea of joining the police once she has given birth to the baby. And I was wondering how this motif will, play out. So looking forward to the new novels. Any idea when the book will be published?
Oh, my publisher I'm working on the sixth book. I'm about halfway through it. My publisher has the fourth and fifth novels. we're going through the final editing of the fourth novel. So, I'm not sure when, the problem we're running into is that the publisher is in Israel, and they've got all of that conflict going on in Israel that's made it very difficult for them.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, so if there are people here in the audience with us who are not familiar with John's mystery novels, highly recommended. And
Thank you.
actually, these novels, perhaps there is a way I can ask one of my Chicago questions, because yeah, you can certainly read those novels just for the mystery, and the plot is gripping, and there is so much variety from novel to novel. There are two very interesting detectives, but also the city of Chicago, it plays such an important role in this in the book, and also in the most recent publication, Who I Am, you also repeatedly come back to Chicago. You mentioned the dreams that you continue having about Chicago. And there is a quote, like a very brief quote, that I would like to read from Who I Am. You say at one point, and I'm quoting, "Maybe the place we come from wants to keep us close."
Yeah.
So can you comment on this? You haven't lived in Chicago for many years right now, but you still come back
Yeah.
to the city in your work a lot.
Yeah.
So what's the significance of Chicago to you?
It's almost been 50 years
50
since I
years.
lived in Chicago. I left in well, it's more than 50 years. I left in 1973 to go to graduate school at Purdue University. I've been back to Chicago a whole bunch of times. But I think that we were talking about memory and the importance of memories and how the memories tie us together. And I think it's that way with Chicago. My memories of Chicago. One of the things I like about writing the mystery novels is the mystery novels are set in my old neighborhood in Chicago around Humboldt Park. In the third novel, Murder Town, my mother and father appear in Murder Town. They have different names, but they're living in the house my parents lived in, and my mother's they're my parents. I put my friends into my novels. The church that the church that is a major element in the second novel is the church I had my first Holy Communion in, my confirmation, all of that stuff. One of the things I like, like I say, one of the things I like about writing the mystery novels is that I'm going back into that area, and also I'm doing research about that area, and it's been a lot of fun just finding out stuff about my old neighborhood and how it's changed. I haven't been in the old. I visited the old neighborhood the last time was in 2016, and it had radically changed from what it was like when I was a kid growing up. And following that change for these mystery novels has been a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm. I keep thinking that earlier today we were talking about those links between generations, and we were talking about language and food. But I also think that places, and especially those, like locations of our childhoods, also play such an important role in the act of remembering in general, right?
Oh, absolutely. And writing about those things, it brings them back. In the mystery novel I'm writing right now, it's called The Last Murder, and Hank and Marvin go to a restaurant that it's set in 1995. This is a restaurant they used to frequent when they were cops. But going back to this restaurant brings back so many memories for them, and it brings back a lot of memories for me because my parents used to go to that restaurant, and my and all of the just all of those memories are just it's like I'm visiting my parents again when I'm writing this novel and visiting the old neighborhood. and wandering around. It's just a good feeling, and it's a feeling that's important to me.
Thank you. Now, we are nearing the end of the webinar. We still have a few minutes, so if some of you have some questions, some other questions or comments, now is the time to ask them. So, because we can still take one or two questions, I believe, if anybody wants to pose a question. Yeah, Paweł, please.
Yes, to Professor Guzłowski, one more time. Do you always need to be Catholic in order to be Polish?
Say that again.
Do you need to be Catholic in order to be Polish?
My mother had two aunts who grew up Polish Catholic. They married two Jewish brothers. All four of them died in Auschwitz. And when I learned that, what it taught me about Polish identity is that it's much more complex and much more open than people sometimes think.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you. Ted?
If you want a different story, my family's story. My mother wrote her memoirs after my father died. It took her a long time. It ended up being 1,500 typed pages. Her story is of being born in the United States and growing up in a Polish family and being involved with the Polish National Catholic Church and marrying a priest. And her life, 50 years of marriage with a priest, moving from town to town throughout the years of their marriage and their experiences. So if you want a different story, there's a different story for you, and a different idea of how religion and being Polish may fit together.
Has she ever had that did she ever have that published?
No, we never got it done.
Thank you so much for this comment. Thank you. We have one more question from B. Buddha. I'm sorry. I can't see the first name here.
It's Bożenna Buddha.
Bożenna, okay. I'm sorry.
Two ends. But I'm sorry, my video is not working, but I find this very interesting and look forward to them when I find out about them. And I wanted to ask John specifically, because America, as we all know, is such a diverse place. It's such an amalgamation or salad bowl or whatever you wish to call it, of so many different ethnic backgrounds, and some groups make more of an effort to be able to have their children and grandchildren or their friends know about this aspect of their cultural heritage. And I want to know what John found was helpful, perhaps. I understand he has children, right? And maybe grandchildren. How do you communicate? Do you communicate your heritage to them, and how do you communicate it to them, and what is their reaction? What is their take on it? How do they identify? Thank you.
Okay. I have one daughter still alive when she was a kid. I think she was about 19 years old, and when my mother died, she was about 26. But I shared a lot of my family's story with her, and we were also in touch with. My daughter was in touch with my parents for a long time, and so she felt a closeness to them, and I think she still feels that closeness with them. She has a daughter, and I've never talked about this with my daughter. With my granddaughter rather. I know she knows. I know she knows I've written these books about my parents, and but I've never spoken to her about uh, what she feels about all of this stuff, all of these memories. I'll have to ask her about this. Thanks for bringing this up. I'll have to ask her about this.
I think the reason I ask is because it's such an interesting aspect to grandparenting, for example. And I remember that when we came from Poland, and so it took until my children were born for my parents, especially my father, my parents who were children during the war in Poland, to really to give them examples of what their treatment was as children during the war by the armies from either side. And it was very interesting and very, I think, cathartic for all of us because my children were able to write about, they wanted to write about it for something they were doing in school. And this was grammar school still. So they were in that third, fourth, fifth grade, and they did write about it. So they were so, it kind of made a special bond between them.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And the grandparents. And so now I'm in the situation with having grandchildren myself. And so I am trying to, the same, a little bit of the same format. Of course, my experiences have been different, but they are very receptive if it's in an environment where they don't feel threatened, where you can say, well, this was part of life at that time, and this is where your roots are, this is where we come from as a people. And of course, this being America, they have another side from their father's side who and different American heritage too. But I think they place a premium on this because they call me babcia, and this is their special name for me, as opposed to their grandfather, it's grandpa. But they know they have a specialty, and they know there's a special language, and they are actually navigating their way around Polish because I speak some Polish to them, and I want them to be able to be familiar with it, because language, I find, is such a special road into a cultural heritage that you cannot get any other way.
Oh, absolutely.
If you can. So thank you so much for being on and bringing up these things and talking about it, because it's really wonderful to hear. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you for this question and comment that shows the potential for passing on of the Polish ethnic heritage to subsequent generations. Now, John, one final question to you before we wrap things up. So, what other books can we be looking forward to as readers? We've heard about the new mystery novel that hopefully will come out soon. Any new books, like collections of columns or collections of poetry in the making?
Oh, I'm primarily working on this book, but I'm also always writing poetry, and the columns, I have no intention of stopping the columns, although I won't even tell you about the newspaper, but I'm always writing, and 2 years ago I started writing a book of poems about Franz Kafka, and I think I'm about a third of the way through the book of poems. So eventually there'll be a book of poems about Franz Kafka, and then I also often I like writing about the monk Ikkyu, and so I've been writing some more poems about him and his experiences. So, I'm just always writing, and that's one of the things that I always told my creative writing students: always be writing. And I think that's good advice for anybody who wants to be a writer. Never stop.
Thank you so much. The columns are in the Dziennik Związkowy to answer the question in the chat. And right now, I think it's time for us to finish. Please join me in thanking John for being with us. I will clap my virtual hands too, if I can.